Assalamu alaikum. We're here with Muzammil Ayub Thakur, and he represents the World Kashmir Freedom Movement. I will apologize in advance for the internet. We're having some issues in Pakistan right now, as I mentioned earlier. Um, Muzammil bhai, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Hello, Shukriya. Thank you for hosting, and I hope that you're well as well. The whole team is well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your duas. Recently, there was during the sort of the awkward sort of UK riots, you had a talk in London, and you were attacked by some Hindutva characters, goons. Alhamdulillah, you broke some noses and some jaws, but they did a number. They did some damage on you. We hope you're doing well. Can you describe what the situation has been like in the UK when it comes to right wing white nationalism, or as well as the Hindutva influence that you see over there? And can you go through the event and how it happened with you?
Well, let's be clear that this isn't the first time that we've seen the rise of Hindutva on the streets of the UK. In Leicester, a couple of years ago, people may remember that on I guess it was the India-Pakistan match, and that became an excuse for the right-wing Hindutva fanatics to come to the streets and not just celebrate the Indian cricket, which would have been fine, but then to attack and to denigrate Pakistan and Islam. And of course, that started creating riots. So it's been festering. It's been festering for a while. And with the rise of Modi, it's opened the floodgates for those people that have been secretly or covertly, or at least not openly, supporting right-wing fascism in the way that I perceive it would be anti-Muslim, not necessarily always anti-immigration or anti-brown, but definitely anti-Muslim. In the same way the race riots or the immigration riots that are happening in the UK are specific. Now, people will say it's about all immigration. But why is the violence always perpetuated towards those people of color, particularly Muslims? Why were the mosques vandalized? Why were Muslim women's hijabs torn off? So I argue that although immigration may be an excuse, and even it may be legitimate to some extent, but the targeting is always of Muslims. Always of Muslims. They are always the first people to be victimized.
Yeah, it is very unfortunate and it's very true. But it seems to be the case that you were particularly targeted not just for your Muslim identity, but your identity as a Kashmiri.
So
And it seems that India has been emboldened recently because of a certain alliance that they have with Western powers these days, and they've sort of been flexing their muscles in Western Europe and in America and in Canada. So, do you think that this attack was in a similar vein? It was Kashmir centric, or do you think it was a sporadic, random sort of act of violence? And
there
can
is
you
no way that I
describe the
believe that
act
it
as
was
well?
random. Yeah, it's absolutely, it wasn't. It couldn't have been random. An event that is specifically on Kashmir. Look, I'll be very honest with you, and I think it's time that we speak about these things openly. When there are events that happen on Kashmir, you will always find somebody in the audience that is from India writing notes constantly, that is recording everything constantly. Such people always exist. It's not new. So when I see it, it's not something to be scared of. It's been happening my whole life. There was such a person. I took no heed of it. I thought this person is going to eventually leave, and that's what they did. But outside, the moment I stepped outside and everybody waved their goodbyes, everybody walked off into the different directions. And I don't know if they were waiting for me at the car or they followed me from the venue. And they decided to attack me. In the beginning, I didn't understand. I had no idea what was going on. But the moment they started saying, Jai Bharat Mata ki Jai, Kashmiri Atangwadi, Mussalman Atangwadi, whatever the typical terminology that Hindutva fascists use. Immediately I understood what was happening. This had nothing to do with the race riots. It had nothing to do with the right wing. It had nothing in the UK. It had nothing to do with white immigration. It was specifically targeted by Indians, whether it was the state, whether it was their functionaries, or whether it was individuals acting on their own accord. For me, it all comes to the same thing: that why would the state perpetuate such language against Kashmiris and Muslims that it compels civilians who are working on their own to attack somebody on the streets of London? So I felt they weren't British nationals. They must have been students or recently come here for work, jo bhi tha, but they weren't British nationals, so they weren't born and raised in the UK. So यानी कि इन लोगों ने export किया है अपने fascism from India, from the streets of Delhi, Gujarat and Mumbai to the streets of London. So, I mean, with that attack, of course, I defended myself. Alhamdulillah, I defended myself very well. and made them run away. But one of the important things that I took away from this was that, number one, the attacks are no longer digital. For the last 5 years, or specifically 5 years since 2019, but pretty much our whole lives, Indians have been targeting activists, people that are working for Kashmir for so many years, through print, through their mainstream media, through the internet, through social media. Many reports have been published about people like myself, like I'm not going to mention names just to put them in trouble, many other Kashmiris as well, criminalizing them, denigrating them, slandering them. Us had tak theek tha, you know, there was no immediate life threat. But now to come to the streets, the way that they did it in, for example, Canada, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, that was assassinated, and recently one of his associates there was also an attempt on his life, but he survived. And then in America, the FBI caught a person that was going around attempting to commit assassinations. In where is it? In Qatar, spies were caught. In Germany, spies were caught. So this isn't new, but the fact that they now come into the UK, that's something new. But for me, it's important to understand that they have now been emboldened, that they can come to the streets, they can come after our lives individually. But the second thing I want to mention is they had a camera with them. One of their boys was recording. Or I can only assume to humiliate me afterwards कि देखो हमने इस आतंकवादी के साथ क्या किया. उल्टा उनके साथ क्या हुआ वो तो मुझे पता है, अगर किसी और को पता नहीं है मुझे पता है. So I do hope that they release that video humiliating themselves. And that's the epitome of the Indian state in itself. That they will attempt, they will try, they will use various different designs. In the end, they humiliate themselves. That's all I'm going to say.
No, it's very unfortunate. I think they're taking a lot of time editing that video in any way possible to make you look bad, but I don't think it's going to be the case because, fortunately for us as Muslims, I think the protein intake for the Indian sort of activist types is a bit on the weaker side, and alhamdulillah for that. Alhamdulillah that you were able to defend yourself with honor, and what I've noticed is that this goonish sort of trend to attack in mobs, in groups. A lot of their other proclivities, sexual and otherwise, also you see happen in mobs. They tend not to be able to conduct anything nefarious or noble individually.
Absolutely.
It's a very unfortunate sort of mob mentality. And I think that because they've had a mask-off sort of moment in the past 4 or 5 years, I think it's equally as appropriate that we also have a mask-off moment and we talk about the problem as it is, and then name it, shame it, identify it, and then also to discuss ways that we can combat it. Unfortunately, the Pakistani state has not been very helpful these days. It's been dealing with a lot of their own problems. Classically, this is something that they would have taken up. But your case isn't isolated. We've seen this very strange sort of nexus between a very specific strain of the European and Western right-wing Zionism and Hindutva. So there are right-wing activists who wouldn't associate with those two kinds of movements. They would be sort of homegrown, religious nationalists or these kinds of characters. But the mainstream of the right-wing, or the alt-right, as you would call it, it's not even the mainstream. It's mainstream in terms of numbers, but you see with the rise of characters like Dr. Jordan Peterson, you see characters like Tommy Robinson in the UK. These people will identify issues that the majority of a nation might be facing, and then present solutions which are so absurd, like we have to ally ourselves with Zionism, or we have to ally ourselves with Hindutva. Can you talk more about this nexus? Again, is it tangible? Is it something observable? Do you have evidence for this, or do you think it's just something that we're observing from the results that we're getting?
So the Zionism Hindutva nexus, it's one of my subjects. The problem is that people understand Hindutva as it is from 2019, or at least since Modi came into power. Understand that the Hindutva project, the RSS project, has been around since the 1920s. That's when it was formed. They allied themselves with the Nazis, with fascists of the day, with Adolf Hitler. They modeled themselves on that, this superior Aryan race. They modeled themselves with having this one nation, one party, one ruler. This is exactly what the Nazis believed in. This is exactly what the RSS believes in. To the extent the swastika is the same, their salute is the same. I'm not going to do it because it's illegal in this country, but the salute is the same. The uniform is the same. There is very little to differentiate between them. Now, one would say that it was just a model, and this is an over-exaggeration. Look at the relationship from the 20s. Look at the relationship from the 40s, since the inception of India, and how the Israeli and Indian nations supplied each other and helped each other openly in the public. People like Nehru would say, no, we believe in the Palestinian statehood. But behind closed doors, they were taking aid and being facilitated by the Israelis. Documented evidence. I wasn't around to give you an eyewitness account, but there are other people that have, academics and scholars, that have documented this, of how the Indian and Israeli relationship predates the conception of India. So in that sense, after that, what we've seen is the RSS by extension, the BJP may not have had so much power, but they have been growing. They have been waiting. TK, it took them 100 years, but they waited. They were patient. By 1990, they only had 1 or 2 parliamentarians, but today they rule the country to the extent that they have picked up fights in Afghanistan. They've gone all the way into Afghanistan, set up bases there at one time, not anymore. But what purpose did India have in Afghanistan? There's this special relationship that India has with France, with America. It's unnatural. So the whole purpose, and it's not by assumption or by literature reading. It is literature reading, but it's their literature. It's them saying, वो खुले आम कहते हैं कि हमें क्या करना है, हम क्या यकीन करते हैं और हम उसको implement करवाएंगे. And that's exactly what they're doing. They believe in certain things and they implement it. They believe that Muslims are minorities and should remain minorities and they are second-class citizens. They created the CAA and NRC bills, the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens. They created concentration camps in Assam. They removed Article 370 in Kashmir. अब वो कह रहे हैं कि हम आज़ाद कश्मीर, उनकी ज़बान में POK. लेकिन हमारे लिए तो हम आज़ाद कश्मीर भी लेंगे. And if anybody has any doubts of that, look at the terrorism that they do, not just in Azad Kashmir, but for example in Balochistan, in Gilgit-Baltistan. Did you not catch Kulbhushan Yadav? Is he not a prime example? Do you not think that there are more Kulbhushan Yadavs? So the way that the Zionists work, often I argue, is that if anybody believes that Zionism has failed to any extent in terms of the propaganda machinery and people no longer believing it, that is where India succeeds. If they have modeled themselves on Zionism, वो वही चीज देखते हैं कि ये लोग कहाँ पे फेल हुए हैं, ये लोग कहाँ पे नाकाम हुए हैं और उसको हम ठीक करवाएंगे. And that's exactly what they've done. Look at the information that has been coming out from Gaza, from Palestine over the last months, years. The moment that the Israelis say anything that is nonsensical, it used to take days. Now it's minutes that the disinformation is being completely blown out of the water. With Indian misinformation, disinformation, lies, and propaganda, it takes months, even years sometimes, to counter that. The public, कोई कहेगा कि it's Iran or it's Afghanistan or it's South America or whatever it is, they're the ones that are debunking the Israeli lies. It's the general public. Access to information. You just can't hide that information anymore. But India are able to hide that information. They're, if not able to conceal it completely, at least they're able to dump it down into the dark spaces that nobody looks at. Which is why I argue that they're more successful than the Israelis.
Right. So the nexus is the tree by its fruits.
You're muted.
Sorry. So the tree by its fruits. It's quite obvious that the nexus is clear in terms of policy. I think the Hindutva IT cell is modeled after the Israeli Hasbara. It's quite clear. And I suspect that it's an iterative model where they're learning from the mistakes of the Israelis. In some cases, the Israelis were a bit too brazen. Because there's two angles to this sort of conflict. It's opinion at home and an opinion abroad. So opinion at home, I think India is pretty successful with the sort of kohol wearing fighter pilots from Pakistan in their Bollywood movies. I think it's so over the top at this point that maybe even some of the Indian population is getting sick of it. But I think they've had a good 50-60 years diet of junk food, where the body is now full of poison in terms of the Bollywood imagery of the Muslim, or because there's only one or two kinds of Muslims that can exist. But what is unique with Kashmir is this sort of whitewashing of Kashmiri history. And you saw recently with the very strange film, what was it called? The Kashmir Files. That was completely, It was completely organic and nobody was paid to do it. And and then you see it now followed up every single few months or every single year with an increasingly more ridiculous movie, which is one of the new ones was
Article 370.
Yeah, Article 370. Yeah. And then there's another one about Indian Muslims, not Kashmiri Muslims, about how they were joining ISIS and there was like 3 or 4 people who had done it, but
Yes.
they showed it was like thousands of people who had joined ISIS. A lot
Yeah.
of these back-to-back sort of ridiculous movies are coming out, and I think the mask off moment, for me at least personally, came when they banned Dr. Zakir Naik. I think that was a very obvious sort of point where the general public in Pakistan and the Muslim world should have realized that this is what India is all about. This is what Indian secularism has been about. It's been, and at this point, I think it's quite obvious between a hard Hindutva from the BJP and a soft Hindutva that you get from the opposition parties. There's no in between anymore, or at least even the illusion of the in between has been removed. In this sort of circumstance, do you see, in the post Article 370 world, do you see Kashmir, the Kashmiri diaspora being galvanized? Do you see Pakistani consulates, embassies, Pakistani citizenry? Do you see them doubling down on this cause more seriously, or is it unfortunately because of the material circumstances that Pakistan is facing these days? Do you see them quieter on the issue of Kashmir?
You see, it's for me. I can answer this in 2 ways. One is as a Kashmiri with hope. The other is as somebody that's completely neutral. As somebody that's neutral, it seems that until the situation in Pakistan stabilizes itself, becomes stronger, the people inside Pakistan as well as the Pakistani diaspora won't really be able to engage much on the Kashmiri issue. They will have their priorities. You have to look after your own house first before you look after somebody else's. As a Kashmiri, I would argue that we are that part of that house as well. Fine, we may not be the dining room or the kitchen, but we're still part of that house. There is no Pakistan without Kashmir. But as a Kashmiri, I say that, and I hate to say this, but the oppressed will always say that more needs to be done. It isn't a critique of Pakistan. It's a desperation of a people that have been oppressed for so long. You know, we're genetically now. It's in our DNA to feel oppressed and suppressed. Children that are born that understand that what oppression is before they understand the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s is a problem. So in that sense, when we say that Pakistan needs to do more, it is not out of spite. It's out of hope, out of love, out of desperation. So when we need things to be done, as Kashmiris, often they won't understand the greater ramifications or international politics or economic situations, socio-political relations. These things are at such a scale that laymen often can't understand it. But that isn't necessarily a Kashmiri's problem. A Kashmiri's problem is always going to be the basic fundamental need for survival. And that's what we're trying to explain to people. This is exactly what it is. It is no longer just about hum Pakistani hai, Pakistan hamara hai. It's no longer about that. It is about preserving our identity. Because an-Qareeb, you're not going to see any more Kashmiris. The way that settler colonization and demographic change is happening inside Kashmir is unprecedented. It took Israel 30, 40 years to do what India have done in the last 5 years. So again, it comes back to the same point, जो मैं originally कह रहा था, that where Israel have failed, India have succeeded. They do things at such a rapid speed and people don't either notice it or they don't care about it. And yes, settler colonization is a big problem because it means the elimination of the Muslim Kashmiri, chalo theek hai, Kashmiri identity, khatam ho jayega, but the Muslim identity, that is where the problem lies. We know they're anti-Muslim. We know they're anti-Pakistan. We know they're anti-Muslim Pakistani, which by extension means anti-Kashmiri and Muslim Kashmiri. By doing that, they're trying to expand this vision that they have of Akhand Bharat. And people say that, yeah, this is a fantasy, Indian fantasy. Let them do this adventure. Oh, look, if the Israelis are planning on doing this, and they're doing this, the Indians have already started doing this. They're fiddling around in Nepal, fiddling with Sri Lanka, fiddled with Bangladesh. Chalo theek hai, the situation in Bangladesh is different now. Fiddled with Afghanistan, fiddling in Pakistan. They believe all of this belongs to them, to the extent that even Iran belongs to them, to the extent even Saudi Arabia belongs to them. They call the holy Kaaba in Mecca, and I want people to really understand this. Haram Sharif, they call Makeshwar Mahadev Temple. और अलग बात है कि कुतुब मीनार का अलग नाम है, उसको कहते हैं कि विष्णु स्तंभ टेम्पल. और चलो हमारा जो मुसलमानों का बाबरी मस्जिद, उन लोगों ने उसको कहा ये तो राम मंदिर है. यार मुसलमानों की गैरत कहाँ है? When they call the holy Kaaba as Makeshwar Mahadev temple, that should alert the people. And you should look at the maps that they create. You should look at the work they're doing against the Muslims. Just because you cannot see it immediately, ask the Muslims what is happening to them. Ask them what's happening immediately to them. So when we talk about this this expectation that Kashmiris have, it isn't just for that small, tiny little bit of being "Hame Pakistan bana cha." It isn't some kind of referendum that we're trying to fight. It's literally our lives, our Muslim identity, and by extension, the sovereignty of Pakistan.
No, I think it's very well put. And as somebody who is technically a part of Indian Kashmir,
Indian occupied Kashmir.
Indian occupied Kashmir, you risk a lot by saying these things. Even in diaspora, you risk a lot by clearly there is a direct physical threat to your life as well. And unfortunately, I think something that maybe you cannot vocalize, I'll vocalize on your behalf. A lot of the Indian occupied Kashmiri diaspora, they're very afraid of the government because they might have relatives back home, they might have properties, they might be sending money back home, whatever it is, whatever the case is. And now also overseas, they might not feel safe in Western European countries because of what's been going on in the past couple of years. Now, this is the situation that the Kashmiri diaspora deals with. Given those circumstances, I think Pakistan, and I think it's a fair and it's a humble enough request on your part. I think you can be much louder and much harsher with your request. That would be completely fair. At the same time, that the Pakistani diaspora and then the Pakistani community, as well as the diplomatic enclaves, they need to step up their game. Unfortunately,
100%.
we've been in a paralysis post the Musharraf era, and I think equally as damning as 370 was, the Musharraf era onwards, where a new kind of Pakistani identity was reimagined or recreated, or where it was Pakistan first and Kashmir maybe was a moot point, and we wanted 100 years of peace with India, and these kinds of, I think, flights of fancy that a military dictator had in Pakistan. We have also been in a state of paralysis because those foreign policy points that we held on to maintained national sovereignty within Pakistan as well. Because in all honesty, Pakistan's sovereignty is Kashmir. It is Pakistan ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah. And if you give up on these kinds of ideas, the ramifications are deep, and they have never been this bad in, I think, a significant while. In a post-Musharraf sort of reality, what are the weak points, do you think, in terms of foreign policy in Pakistan, in terms of Pakistan flexing its muscles for Kashmir? Where do you think we're lacking, and what are the steps that we need to take, even as a citizenry, even if the state is not listening to us?
Knowledge. Honestly, look, I know that in the far-flung areas of Pakistan, people are still staunchly Kashmiri. But the problem is the new generation, and I know the kind of names that you call them, people that are slightly more modern, that have more aspirations, able to access first world countries. This new generation, these are the people that are going to be in power tomorrow, as industrialists, as politicians, as academics, whatever they may be. The information isn't there. Most of that information in relation to Kashmir their consumption is from the Indian mainstream or from Indian vloggers or whatnot. There isn't enough literature, publications, vlogging, just general information about Kashmir, about the plight of Kashmiris, about what Kashmir actually means to Pakistan, that it actually is a part of Pakistan, that the public can rally behind this issue. So in the 80s, 90s, even up to the 2000s, people were staunchly Kashmiri. I mean, I still know of families that sent their entire generations of sons to Kashmir. So we recognize the sacrifices of those mothers and fathers that gave their sons to Kashmir. But if we take Kashmir out of the equation, does the general Pakistani population know the sacrifices of their mothers and daughters and their sons for Kashmir? They don't recognize it. TK, you know about these wars, you know about the anti-terrorism, people that have been sacrificed or people that have been martyred because of terrorism. But this is also part of that. Our history, it should be part of your history. Until the people of Pakistan don't understand it or see it or recognize it, we can't expect the state to be able to do anything more. The pressure has to come from the people. So jab tak people like yourselves that are doing commendable jobs in creating awareness and education among the public, and other people as well. And this is where most of that consumption is starting to come from. Nobody's watching the mainstream media anymore, be it BBC or be it inside Pakistan or be it in India. They watch these 30-second clips. I'm of that generation where documentaries used to be for 2 hours long. Then suddenly they became 1 hour long. And in the advent of Facebook, they were 30 minutes long. In the advent of Twitter, they became 2.5 minutes. With Instagram, they became 1 minute. In TikTok, they're 30 seconds. This is the problem. Information now has to be condensed from 2 hours into 30 seconds. But that's the new age, and that's what we need to do. Podcasts are where it matters. Blogs are where it matters. So when we talk about what can be done, what are the problems, it's about innovation. In this day and age, we need to innovate faster than how our enemies are innovating. And I don't mean that just in terms of information. I even mean that in lawfare, in warfare. It's the world is such a different place now. And conventional forms of education, of war, of information, of literature, of anything can't be done anymore.
I think you've taken a very subtle jab at conferences and talks
in those methods anymore.
The classical sort of things that we would have, a special day of Kashmir, Sunday school specials, those kinds of things. I think the new age requires these, and I think the analogy is very apt of the documentary moving from 2 hours to 30 seconds, that we need to adopt new kinds of technology to communicate the Kashmir cause. Under the surface within Pakistan, regardless of how the state gets, the Kashmir issue is always there, it's always simmering. What we have, however, seen is a decline in the Pakistani, a very drastic decline in the Pakistani support for the armed struggle in Kashmir. And that was, I think, a departure from the classical policy that Pakistan has maintained with Kashmir. Do you think the armed struggle in Kashmir has a future? Given the current circumstances, do you think that these independent sort of armed struggles that are happening within Kashmir right now, do they get the kind of traction online with the Kashmiri youth as well as the general Indian public so that they know that the Kashmiri people mean business? Or do you think that it's a done and dusted idea in their minds because vloggers get to go eat, I don't know, fruit chaat on a boat or somewhere? Do you think that people have gotten over it now?
I'm going to be very, very clear. There is no solution to the Kashmir issue, to the Kashmir dispute, without armed resistance, without legitimate armed resistance that is mandated, encouraged even by the United Nations. Apna deen ko ek second side pe rakhte hain because some people may have a problem. They believe that this is some kind of religious warfare. We didn't bring the religion into it. India did. You cannot negotiate with nothing in your hand. You can only negotiate when there is something to negotiate with. Our armed resistance is that negotiating tool, but it is also an aspect of our defense, self-defense, to make sure that we are defending ourselves. We have every right to use armed resistance. We have every right to defend our people, our nation, our land, our honor, given to us by Islam, but also given to us by the United Nations Security Council resolutions. There is space for it. It will grow because there is a greater resentment. It has been festering inside Kashmir for a long time. Since 2019, since India abrogated Article 370 and 35A, the night before, the things that they were doing before preemptively to make sure that nothing would happen on the streets, picking up children as young as 5 years old from their mother's lap so they wouldn't be stone pelting, picking up imams from their homes so that in the morning they wouldn't elan na karte in the masjids that you need to go out and resist. So that festeration inside in the people is there. Seeing the degradation of society, what India is bringing into Kashmir, people are witnessing it day in and day out. It isn't that they've accommodated it or they've accepted it. It's that they've had to tolerate it to wait for a certain period of time until we as a nation become strong and Pakistan becomes strong to enforce the resistance even further.
Can you clarify for a lot of people? We're going to get further into the details of the armed resistance, inshallah, but can you clarify what kind of cultural degradation and social degradation is India bringing in? Because a lot of people they might peripherally hear these things, but they don't really understand what exactly the settler colonial project that is being pursued by the Chinar Corps in Kashmir, what does it look like? What does it involve? Like, I've heard all sorts of things, drugs, flesh markets, complete cultural upheaval,
genocide.
Children reciting bhajans in school, and idols in school and in public places, and weird monuments dedicated to heroes that are completely alien to Kashmir, and then they're also making this one particular pilgrimage route that ends in Kashmir, right?
Amarnath.
Yeah, which is, again, they can fantasize anything out of this sort of the random bits of mythology that Hindutva has created as its identity. And they're creating a sort of route everywhere that they want to create some trouble in. Can you get into the weeds about this stuff? What exactly is so horrible that's going on?
Everything that you said and more, because a lot of the information that comes outside from Kashmir either is late or it's diluted because people are afraid reporting such instances. But the information that we have is exactly that: cultural and religious genocide. Any place that they feel, like, for example, a masjid, if they feel that this is becoming a hotbed, a hotspot of resistance, a place where people are coming too often, a place where people are becoming too religious, they will somehow find a document that will state that this place used to house a mandir. It was the home of Ram or Sita or Gita or A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then they will convert that masjid into a mandir. That's one part of it. The other part is making sure that in the offices, the traditional Kashmiri clothes are no longer worn. Now, you will say, well, what's in that? The problem is the traditional Kashmiri cloak, for example, is something that covers haya. There is a lot of haya in it. It's very respectful. It's very decent. They want to remove that so you can see the body shape more better. The scarf, can't have a scarf anymore in many places, especially in government offices. In schools, having to sing the Hindu, leave the national anthem. I'm talking about, that's the Indian national anthem. Hindu hymns, the bhajans to be taught, where these Kashmiri Muslim children probably know less hadiths and surahs in the Quran and more about Hindu mythology and Hindu bhajans. That's the cultural genocide. The introduction of alcohol. There was only one place in Kashmir that at least I knew of, one or two places, that had alcohol specifically for tourists, hidden away in a corner that you would never have even saw. Very inconspicuous. Today, kulle aam alcohol is being bought, sold, traded, and had in public by, leave the Kashmiris, by these foreigners, by these tourists, drinking on the streets of Kashmir, where it's unheard of, unseen, unbelievable to have happened pre-2019. But now these foreigners, these foreign invaders, these Indian aliens are coming to Kashmir, kullayam pee rahe hain sharab on the streets and doing marijuana and drugs and heroin and whatnot. The streets are littered with these injections. Somebody would say, to what end? The destruction of society. It's happened in history before, and they learn from history. They know how to do it. They know how to introduce these things. Going into the schools and
they've done it in Punjab. They've done it in Punjab as well.
The best example is Punjab. How do they break the back of the Khalistan movement? By bringing in alcohol and drugs.
And they also brought in the worst sort of heavy industries that would pollute the waters, the atmosphere, which is why Punjab is one of the most polluted places in Indian society. It's quite clear what they're doing in Kashmir. And do you think that the armed resistance has, they have enough fuel for young people? And we saw with some of these protests, like the one, when they tried to test the waters and see, how deep the sentiments are. And you had that one student in the Kashmiri IIT who blasphemed the Rasulullah, and I suspect completely purposefully with state mandate. And you saw the young people, they came out and it was not Kashmiriyat, it was Islam. And then I suspect that these identities are also inseparable now. Kashmiriyat and an idea of an Islamic sort of ethos. I think these are inseparable. Like with Pakistan, you have a lot of these. I heard you on Dilly's podcast, and I think you explained it really well on the Blood Brothers podcast, how an identity that is a Pakistani, which it can be harmful. It has its harms, don't get me wrong, but an identity of Pakistaniyat or Kashmiriyat separated from Islam now seems impossible or alien. Do you think that the youth have enough of a fuel to cover all the spectrum of the political activism, from protests and vlogging and social media all the way to actual armed struggle? Do you think it's there, the fuel is there, and do you think the fire is burning and there's enough young people willing to get into it? And is there an international nexus that can support them?
I don't know whether you can say this is unfortunate or fortunate, but the only realistic form of resistance right now in Kashmir is not the intellectual, it is not the social media, it is only armed. That is the only thing that we have been left with that has scope. Because those that go into the armed resistance know full well what the outcome is going to be. But those people that try to do any political form of dissent, be it on social media or on the streets, stone pelting, or even just an opinion on WhatsApp and Facebook, they will go to jail indefinitely. They will have their livelihoods taken away. It's literally being a living corpse. You just no life. So India have literally forced people to think that the only way to resist now, the only acceptable form of resistance, is armed resistance. Armed resistance. Call it a blessing in disguise or call it a curse, whatever it may be. But they are the ones that suffocated and muzzled the people so much that nobody has the I don't want to use the word courage, but nobody has the strength anymore to be able to do something as simple as a Facebook post, let alone come to the streets to protest. So the only avenue that is left for the people of Kashmir is armed resistance. So be it. We will encourage it, and we will address that issue as publicly as possible.
Even the collaborators or traitor class, like what's his name, Farooq Abdullah, even those kinds of characters were picked up during the Article 370. Like there's even that sort of very pro-India sort of Kashmiriyat, very sort of like posturing sort of collaborator Kashmiriyat, even that's unacceptable. Like the Mehbooba Mufti characters of the Kashmir movement. Yani these people, and I think it is a blessing in disguise that it is a mask-off moment where I think the Indian regime has overestimated their ability to deal with the Kashmiri people, and they've clamped down hard. But this kind of, and you saw it in the case of the Palestine movement as well. And I think there's great parallels between the Palestinian struggle as well as the Kashmiri struggle for their homeland. And you said a very fascinating thing, that the armed struggle has become the only viable option. I think the Pakistani state and the Pakistani populace are the last ones to realize these sorts of things. We still see an attempt, a desperate sort of attempt to make cross-cultural connections within India, which is, I suspect, was never, but is clearly no longer interested in any sort of.
Let me to that end. Let me ask you this question: when somebody like Farooq Abdullah, who at one time was mooted to potentially become the vice president of India, when Mehbooba Mufti, who was literally in bed with the BJP and was responsible for the martyrdom of Burhan Wani, when people like them are jailed, it tells you that India cannot even trust these Kashmiris, these collaborators, the ones that wear the tikka, the ones that sing the Jana Gana Mana, the ones that say, okay, we are proudly Indian. They don't even trust these Kashmiris. How do you think that they're going to trust Pakistan and Pakistanis when it comes to Aman Ki Asha or trade or business or relations? If they can't trust these Kashmiris, their own people that worship the Indian constitution, and worse yet, worship Modi, people that used to call Modi my elder brother in the name of Sajad Lone, people that have willingly sold their souls to the BJP. When the Indian state cannot trust these Kashmiris, it begs the question: why are the people of Pakistan, or institutions inside Pakistan, willing, or even considering that India would be honest with them? I mean, I can't explain it any better than that.
No, I think that's a very accurate analysis of the actual situation on ground, that the BJP RSS regime is not interested in. I suspect that the Indian political class across the board is not interested in dealing with Pakistan at this point. I think at best they were delaying tactics, and I think the Pakistanis took the bait during the Musharraf era under the name of prospering or economic development or whatever excuse that we had at that time. And I suspect that there's a very desperate clamoring right now for that. Again, these things maybe for the audience are a bit hard to understand. When an idea sort of takes hold of a nation state, there are interest groups, political classes, individuals who are benefiting from that ideology. And I think that particular class seems to be very desperate in Pakistan right now. They're doing all sorts of things to clamber down on the internet, and
it's humiliating. For me, it's a humiliation to be. Look, there is no dearth of talent in Pakistan. You don't need India. You just don't. The cultural differences that you have, India doesn't need India. Let's be frank here for a minute, right? The South Indians don't like the North Indians. The people of Bengal have nothing to do with the people in Maharashtra. The center have completely, central India are completely disengaged with the rest of India. Nobody in India gets along with each other. It's like the best way to explain it is like a United States of multiple different cultures and ethnicities that don't get along. A Chinese thing, we were talking about this before, that a Chinese think tank, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, said that the only way for India to survive if it breaks up, yani balkanization, because there is so much difference between different states and different regions that it just can't survive. So I'm not saying that it's inevitable. What I'm saying is that the people inside India have their own problems, have their own fault lines. Why do you want to engage with those people that are eventually going to try and tamper with the fault lines inside Pakistan? Let them be. They will implode eventually. I mean, it's a critically analyzing India as it is right now. At some point, there is going to be some kind of implosion. Why do Pakistanis want to be even engaged with that, with those people? The ramifications will be far too much across the board, not just within India. If you want to exploit those fault lines, that's fine. But to be part of them.
The Pakistani deep state has the Pakistani sort of the blob, let's say, the interest groups, the industrials, the landlords. It's overly represented by Punjabis and Sindhis, and there seems to be a sort of amnesia when it comes to the relationship with the Hindutwas, with the Hindus in general, or with India, and they have this sort of Western-backed fantasy of being part of some sort of containment for China. It all has to do with the foreign policy issues, unfortunately, that our elite are grappling with, because I suspect that their cultural alliances in America, in the Western world, are so deep. Yani, their children go to Europe and America and Canada to study, and they wear Western clothes, they eat Western food, they listen to Western music and film and TV. So it's very hard for them to imagine a world where they can be allied with China or Russia or the Central Asian Muslim states or with Iran. They've always enjoyed this sort of special status amongst the Western political elite as a good lapdog, or as a good whipping boy when it comes to South and Central Asian politics. So that whole class, is, I suspect, is on its way out, and I suspect it's on its way out, and I suspect that it's not going to go lightly. It's not going to go quietly, unfortunately. But we can hope and we can pray that it happens in a timely, in a sort of efficient manner, where there's not a big hue and cry and not a big fuss, because even Pakistan has its fault lines, and the only identity and a linchpin in that identity is Kashmir.
Of course.
And I think the Pakistani state and the Pakistani public needs to realize how deep, and not to say this as to downplay the Palestinian cause, but the Kashmiri cause is equally, if not more important to Pakistaniyat itself. Yani beyond just the scope of our personal dispositions with Islam and how we feel about our Muslim brothers and sisters and how we might feel about the first Qibla and Masjid Al-Aqsa. But Kashmiriyat is also immediate. It's here. It's geographically completely, and it's linked to our very survival. I think that this cosmopolitan sort of attitude that we've been enjoying in the past 10-15 years about how all these are all conspiracy theories and ye to Maulviyon ki baatein hain, and we can have a neutral zone Kashmir, and I think this is a big fantasy when it comes to the water, when it comes to the geography, and when it comes to India's foreign policy. India is quite clear in attitude to what it wants to do with Pakistan and what it attempted in Afghanistan. I think it was very appropriate that you pointed that out. A lot of people are not able to make these sort of connections because the average person is assuming that it's about a specific territory. It's not about a territory bound by certain lines called Kashmir. It's about a greater project, which is the Hindutva project. And you said that knowledge is the number one thing. So is the number one thing for the public. So educate us perhaps on what are the similarities between the Kashmiri and the Palestinian cause, and where does it depart? And can you do this from a perspective of the average Pakistani so that they can understand better on how important this is and how close to home this is for them?
Look, I've heard the stories. I've never actually read this, but I've been brought up with this story so many times that the Ka in Pakistan is Kashmir. So the envisionment of Pakistan included Kashmir, as Sindh it would be, as Gilgit-Baltistan, as Balochistan, as Punjab, as is Kashmir. In that sense, we are as Pakistani, if not more Pakistani than Pakistanis themselves. And I'll tell you why. Because I feel like most Pakistanis have forgotten what freedom meant or what it means. I think you don't value or you realize the sacrifices that your ancestors had to give for that freedom and what we're still giving for the same freedom. So when it comes, if you're able to feel for Palestine on a human level, then you should be able to, the first point is on a human level, if you feel for the Palestinians, then you should feel for the Kashmiris on a human level. You want to talk about stone pelters being rounded up and killed? That happens in Kashmir. You want to talk about the human shields that happen in Palestine? Happens in Kashmir. You want to talk about rape and torture? Happen in the tens of thousands in Kashmir. You want to talk about, I don't know, illegal and draconian laws? Have a look at Kashmir, UAPA and PSA, the anti-terror laws. When we talk about these children being rounded up in Palestine, do you not know about 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds being taken to jail from their mother's lap in the middle of the night in Kashmir? Or the masjids being turned into torture centers, the loudspeakers being used, and the children being tortured? My cousin was one of them, so that people would be terrified in the area. So when we talk about the similarities of the Palestinian people and the Kashmiri people, I mean, it's there. It's the oppression is there.
Is your
it's the
cousin
same.
still in Kashmir?
Yes, of course, he's still in Kashmir. He's still in jail. Every other day, one cousin or the other is in jail. A couple of years ago, my uncle, to put pressure on me because I said something, I mentioned Zia Mustafa in the United Nations, and very quickly my uncle was found murdered in the streets in his hometown. So these are ramifications that people like myself had. So when we talk about the Palestinian and the Kashmiri thing, even the diaspora, look, you'll see the difference here is the Palestinian diaspora are united and they'll work for the Palestinian movement. The Kashmiris, it is much more difficult because they're still able to go to Kashmir. At one point, even I was able to go to Kashmir. But the moment they affiliate themselves with a resistance movement, the Indians will either cancel their visa, pick up their families, create trouble for them, take away their land and property and assets, as has happened with me and other people's families. So that's the fear. That's where the differences begin. The Palestinians outside are not just settled, but they're active with the Palestinian movement. With us, it's different because we still have family members inside Kashmir. We still are able to travel there, of course, unfortunately, with Indian visas or Indian passports. But also the problem is this. The information is out there about the Palestinians, not just by the Palestinians, but by non-Palestinians. They are there, not even Muslims. They are committed to liberating that land. They are committed to highlighting the information, the atrocities, the occupation. Where is the commit? And this is from non-Palestinians, non-Muslims. We first look at Pakistan. Where is that commitment and dedication by the Pakistanis? Where is it? Where is it from the Muslims? Where is it from the liberal class that scream about women's rights? What about the rights of women inside Kashmir? They scream about child rights. What about the rights of children inside Kashmir under occupation? What about the women that were raped and tortured in Quran Pushpora? What about Asfa Bano that was blinded, that was murdered? What about Asia and Nilofer that were drowned and then raped? I mean, where is the Pakistani liberal left talking about this? And as for the right, the Muslim class, where are they on the streets, pounding the streets, saying that the Muslim identity must be protected inside Kashmir? You see them doing it for the Palestinians on the streets for days, weeks, months even. Where is it for the people of Kashmir? You call yourselves human rights activists, you call yourself Muslims, you call yourself the liberal elite or the intellectual class. I don't see the same efforts that people are making for Kashmir as they are making for the Palestinians. And this is not a denigration of the Palestinians. It is a critique and a critical analysis. It is an observation of Kashmiris from the ground, not necessarily my opinion, but from the ground that are saying, कि यार अगर पाकिस्तान अवाम इतना काम कर रहे हैं फ़लस्तीन के लिए, तो हम कहाँ? We're literally next door to you. We are your people. And that's where the problem lies, that until the people of Pakistan don't see Kashmiris as Pakistanis, that's where the problem is. Because they see Palestinians as either a liberal left cause, as a Muslim cause, Masjid al-Aqsa, what it is. When do you see us as in the same light? If you want to make it a Muslim issue, I've told you why it's a Muslim issue. You want to make it a liberal left issue, I've told you why it's a liberal left issue. If you want to make it a sovereignty issue, a Pakistani issue, we are Pakistani, the same with the Sindhis, the same with the Baluchistanis, the same with the Punjabis and other places.
I think it's very appropriate, and I think we talked about this earlier. I think Kashmir is having a branding problem. I think we haven't branded it correctly, and I think you're talking about it in terms of how, if you look at the Palestinian cause, and I think you've absolutely identified it correctly. Arab nationalist types are afraid because it's a sovereignty issue for them. Israel is a big threat. The liberal left is mobilized because it's an anti-imperialist, human project. The religious types are motivated by the fact Masjid al-Aqsa, their Muslim brothers and sisters. So it is a nexus of these 2 or 3 or 4 sorts of ideas that needs to happen for the Kashmiri cause, and it needs to be a rebranding project, I suspect, because the Kashmir cause of the 90s and the pre-90s is one, and the Kashmir cause post 2019 is another. And I think you're one of the few voices I've heard on Kashmir who are attempting this rebrand, and I hope you're succeeding in it, inshallah, and I hope that we can contribute to it in any way possible. Considering rebranding,
We only succeed before you even say anything. We only succeed when people like yourselves platform Kashmiris. That it's the only way. Who else will know about us? Who else will know about the cause of Kashmir? Pakistani, Kashmir ki information, either they'll get it from Twitter or they'll get it from the mainstream TV that you have there. But podcasts are the new thing.
Yes.
YouTube Shorts are the new thing. Jab tak aam Pakistani awam, I don't mean the media elite. I'm talking about the social media elite, like yourselves and other people. You platform the Kashmiris. ठीक है, आपको from religious angle नहीं चाहिए, I'll give you somebody else. You don't want it from an armed resistance angle, I'll give you somebody else. We have people that can talk about the Kashmir issue from whatever angle that you aspire for. मसला ही नहीं है, बस engage हो जाए.
No, I agree with you. I think it's. I think it shouldn't come down to Kashmiri people pleading the Pakistanis for this. I think the Pakistanis need to take our own initiative, inshallah, and I think we'll try to work on this as well after this podcast is done. But a very strange thing that came to my mind in terms of rebranding the Kashmir cause. I've heard a lot of back and forth. There was this one movie that came out of Indian cinema. It was banned here as well as in Indian Kashmir and then in India, and then eventually, it was released and people watched it online. I think you might have heard of it or know the synopsis, I guess. The Heather film, right? The Shakespearean sort of... Okay, you don't know Heather. So Heather is a Shakespeare...
Oh, Heather. Yeah, I remember. Yes, I remember. It was Shakespeare, based on Hamlet.
Based on the Hamlet.
Yeah.
And it was sort of a retelling of Hamlet in a Kashmiri context, and there was elements of it. So those kinds of things had a lot of pushback from the religious class as well. But do you think these kinds of projects, whether independent, whether coming out of India or whether coming out of Pakistan, are helpful in telling the Kashmiri story? Do you think it's part of the rebrand, or do you think it was part of the canvassing and whitewashing of Kashmiri genocide?
Every form of resistance has its place. 100% it has its place. The problem is that you have to utilize your resources accordingly. If you feel that, Pakistan has made a couple of films on Kashmir. In fact, there was, I think, something about Burhan Wani as well.
Yes.
Does anybody in Pakistan know about it?
No.
Let alone Indians. India ko chhod de. They definitely don't know. Pakistanis don't know and they made it. Kashmiris absolutely don't know. So the film industry itself, unless you're able to get this into the film festivals in Venice or whatnot, if you're able to get this into the Sundance screenings, and then it makes a difference. Otherwise, it'll be a commercial failure. Yes, you may say that we've created something for propaganda and it's there, but to what end? TK, maybe somebody will watch it, maybe 10 people will watch it, maybe 100,000 people will watch it for 10 days. Then what? It goes onto the shelf. If people don't remember the Pakistani films that were made on Burhan Wani or anything else in regards to Kashmir, then why would anybody assume that doing this again and again and again is going to be successful?
We need,
like we talked about.
We need a Lion of the Desert.
Yes. So, unless you have something really, really impressive,
a lot of people don't know this, by the way. Can you clarify?
Academy Award. Can
you clarify this? When the Lion of the Desert came out, the famous movie about Umar Mukhtar, where Anthony Quinn plays Umar Mukhtar.
Anthony Quinn, yeah.
That had a big sort of cultural revolution in the Kashmir armed resistance, didn't it?
My God, I still watch. Anytime I get an opportunity, I still watch it. It sends shivers down my spine. It gives me something. Look, this is going to sound really ridiculous. Even the Rambo film, when he goes to Afghanistan and he fights the Soviets, that was something for the Mujahideen at the time. That was a source of inspiration for them. So these things, yes, like I said, they have their place. But you need to do an analysis. You can't just throw spaghetti at the wall and say that whatever sticks. This is, in the new age, we understand things in a slightly different way. We can't repeat the same. What did Einstein say? The definition of madness is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yes.
So we need to critically analyze. We need to do the research. We need to do the correct methodology of figuring out what can work, how it will do it. Even if you decide no, ye to karna hi karna hai, then you have to figure out how you're going to make it successful. Often what happens is we do an event, we do a project, we do a speech, we do something, and there is never any follow-up. It just doesn't. There is no follow-through. We don't look towards the end of the tunnel. We just look at doing it in the here and now. So war analysis, war projects, just the way that, and I hate to say this, I really do hate to say this, the same way that in a corporate environment, as a business is run, to attain a particular goal, for them it's money, for us it's a particular cause. You need to see how you're going to attain that goal. Yes, kabhi you need to do certain bits of activities that are just there for the purpose of propaganda or for the purpose of presence. But jo baki kaam hai, we need to find a way to follow it through, to make it work. To, the lines need to cross at some point that it starts to make sense. So the Haider film became a talking point for the liberal left. And I 100% am convinced that the state was behind it. They created a furore against it for the purpose of the conversation, to take it away from resistance and into the direction of assimilation. That this is why people are not being assimilated, because of this problem. And if you look at it today, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a direct effect, but now the Indian narrative isn't about resistance and whatnot. They say Article 370 to had gaya. Now it is about assimilating Kashmiris into the Indian culture, into the Indian identity. What is that Indian identity? Definitely isn't Muslim, it's Hindu.
I think it's very appropriate that you said that. Even though the Haider film was very culturally relevant and very accurate in terms of its depiction of certain aspects of Kashmiri life, I also suspect that it was a psyop, and the way they banned
100%.
it and then unbanned it, it seemed to be because it was a mainstream project. It wasn't an independent project, and it was very well budgeted, and it had huge set pieces.
In the same way, the Kashmir Files claims the guy, whatever his name is, the guy claimed that it's an independent film, and yet suddenly he's going to every single festival. He's trying to get it in for an Oscar. The state is supporting it, and when you look at the documentation, the ones that that they try to hide behind a lot of other documents, it was sponsored by the BJP. Yes. Directly or indirectly, it was sponsored by them. And it's not just one film. Look how progressively they do this. You talked about Haider, that was several years ago. They did this film, the Kashmir Files. They did Article 370. They came out with another, like on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. So the propaganda machinery is very strong, and anybody that says that these are just independent films is completely devoid of logic or understanding of the Indian deep state.
No, I agree with you. How can you've talked about a sustained movement, something that has follow through, something that is quarterly, something that is very corporate in its ability to achieve goals. It forecasts exact patterns, and it sees where it wants to go, where it wants to take the algorithm, and how it wants to take the conversation forward. How can people join up? How can they support you guys? How can they work with you guys? What is the roadmap? Because a lot of Pakistanis hopefully will be listening to this, especially the shorts. What is the way forward? What is the way they can link up with you people, and what is the next step in the sort of progression for making a sustained movement for the Kashmir narrative?
The first thing is to get in touch with Eon Podcast and make sure that you follow the work that Eon Podcast is doing, because it's not just for Kashmir. It is about when we talk about Kashmir, we talk about Kashmir in the context of a greater Pakistan, a stronger Pakistan, a more sovereign Pakistan, a successful Pakistan. That's why we talk about Kashmir. That's what it means to us. It's not just about our lives. It is, by extension, Pakistan. That's the first thing. So you need to support, the first thing is to support the Pakistani projects that are doing good work. The second thing is you have the All Parties Hurriyat Conference, the true representatives of the Kashmir resistance that is based in Pakistan. Get in touch with them, work with them, follow their work, encourage them, volunteer for them. There is so much work to be done, particularly with this new generation of students and academics that are, about to or already just getting into their professional lives. The people that are under 35. They need to be engaged. Those people need to be engaged. We need to work with them. We need to educate them and then put them out into the field. They are going to be our ambassadors tomorrow. Every Pakistani is an ambassador. But those people that have reach, people like the academics that are going to start teaching their students, they need to have in their syllabus the conversation about Hindutva, the conversation about Kashmir, and how it is important to Pakistan. Those people that are becoming, bankers, they need to be able to create funds that are going to generate enough money for the resistance movement that is being based in the West, in the East, wherever it may be, politically, diplomatically, morally, whatever it may be. Create that fund. There is so much work to be done. So get in contact with the All Parties Hurriyat Conference that can give you that roadmap, that can not just give you a roadmap, but also give you the fundamentals of the freedom struggle, explain to you why it's important, not just for you as Muslims, as humans, but also as Pakistanis. And finally, for those in the diaspora, get in touch with people like myself. I'm not the only person in the diaspora. बहुत ऐसे लोग हैं, मुझसे भी ज़्यादा senior, मुझसे भी ज़्यादा educated and experienced. It doesn't matter who you get in touch with, as long as it is those people that believe in the sanctity of human life, in the sanctity of Pakistan, and of course in the sanctity of the Kashmir freedom movement.
No, we'll put down your details here. People will contact you, inshallah. and hopefully someone is listening to this who is worthwhile and can support the Kashmir struggle. Brother, we wish you the best of luck, inshallah. Keep fighting, keep resisting. We hope you a speedy recovery from that last cowardly attack from the Hindutva goons. And I hope the video comes out and then we can live stream, react to it, and then, have some popcorn, enjoy it. And
Inshallah.
inshallah.
I'm sure that one of the first things they're going to pick up on is the whole armed resistance thing. And within a few weeks after that, you'll see another report against me, which is 100 pages long. Let's see.
No, I may Allah protect you and your family, inshallah. And the Kashmiri people will be free sometime soon, hopefully, inshallah. Thank you for coming, Brother Muzammil. We'll keep doing this as a regular, hopefully, inshallah. And we'll start to develop some sort of ecosystem within the Pakistani podcast sphere. And we'll get the Kashmir cause back on track, inshallah.
Inshallah. Bahut shukriya.